When I first started quilting, I developed a very specific mindset. I'd consider making a patchwork design with angles, but totally not curves. Why? Curves were difficult to piece, but my guest changed my attitude. Elaine Waldschmidt is back for the second program on how to easily create quilt designs with curves without traditional seaming. Elaine, your solution is with fusible web, pressing, and top stitching.
That's right, Nancy. We don't have to seam those curves anymore. In this program, an intricate block called New York Beauty, also named Rocky Mountain, can be sewed without frustration. I'll share my paper piecing technique using the Applicurve method, where the edges are fused and edge stitched to create this stunning design.
Applicurves, that's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Sewing Cabinets, hand-built in the USA by American craftsmen, customized for you. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing designs and Class A needles.
On Sewing with Nancy, generally we start with a simple project and we advance to something more complicated. And during this second program of Applicurves, we're going to work with the more complicated looking block. Elaine, this is a beautiful New York Beauty.
That's correct.
And you can see a lot of the piecing techniques, the curves, and in the past I would have shunned away from this design. But because in the first program you learned how to work with curves, not seaming the curves but top stitching, we can apply the same technique to the New York Beauty block. Just as a refresher, traditionally you would work with curves with concurve and convex seams and seam them together. You can see this opposite seaming technique, and oh my goodness, this was not my favorite thing to do, so I didn't do it. So you'd have to stretch these edges and try to meet them, and of course many people had more patience than I to do this. But to follow this technique, I'm just going to give you a quick review. Elaine uses fusible web and cut a circle for the drunkard's path, that quarter circle design. Cut it 1 inch, or excuse me, about a ½ inch around the circle. We reserved the middle, fused it to the wrong side of a small square or scrap of fabric, and then after cutting it out, would fuse it to the wrong side, or the right side, pardon me, of a base fabric, remove the fusible web and position center, and then stitch with a variety of stitches and cut it into quarters. And then you had your various pieces, very cleverly done, with decorative stitches or just with straight stitches. Well, when working with the New York Beauty block, and Elaine, the other name for that block is?
Rocky Mountain block.
Rocky Mountain block, thank you. You'll see have 3 different portions, and Elaine is first going to show you how to paper piece this section, and then with fusible web, instead of seaming, position the inner portion and the outer arc. And this is quickly positioned, but that way you can get all your points just matched exactly, and I don't have it positioned exactly, but you get the idea to create the block. So this is why we are doing the review, just so you can see that we're applying with fusible web, pressing, and edge stitching. To paper piece, to get those angles, is your greatest task at hand, and so you're going to piece that for us.
Right. In the book that accompanies this program, there's a template for the paper piece dark, and that's really the best way that I know of to get the precision for those points. So you will go ahead and cut out your arc and locate. You'll notice that there's numbers. Each one of the lines that we're going to stitch on are numbered. And so the first thing that I do is I fold on line number 1. We are going to be stitching on the side that has the printing, but we're going to lay all of our fabrics onto the side that's blank. So for positioning purposes, I'm going to lay down my paper arc. Now I have pre-cut 4 rectangles for the spikes that are 2 by 5. And then I've cut rectangles for the fabric that is between the spikes, 2 2 by 5 and 3 3 by 5.
And it's nice to have them pre-cut so you have straight edges.
It is, and I find that I have a lot less waste of fabric if I'm working with correctly sized. I put my one of the 2 by 5 rectangles, one in the red, one in the pink, and luckily we're working with hand dyes here, and so I don't have to worry about the right sides. But I'm going to put those so the raw edges extend my fold by 1/4 of an inch.
Or thereabouts. It doesn't have to be.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be perfect, which is the beauty. You don't have to be perfect, but yet it'll turn out perfect. I'm going to flip it over, and then this is the side that I'm actually going to be stitching on. Now, Nancy, we've got number 70 needles here, and I've also set my machine to a very short stitch length.
And we like small needles, a small size needle hole, because we're going to be having that short stitch length, and it also perforates the paper.
Exactly. So this, I don't have to start right on the line. I'm going to start a little bit outside of the line. I'm going to use any color of thread that I have because it's pieced, but I've picked a contrasting color here, so it's easier for you to see. I stitch right on the line and right off. I'm going to cut. At that time, remove it. You can see what that seam looks like, and I'm going to open this up and hand it over to Nancy, who's going to press it for me.
Well, you can either finger press it toward the fabric, or we'll just quickly give it a press, but now it's ready for the next alignment. But you can see that you've sewn it on the paper, and that paper's going to stay there.
Right. For the next step, I'm going to come to my line number 2, and I use a little ruler to mark 1/4 of an inch beyond. I'm going to press, fold that back, and now I'm going to cut off the excess fabric. What this is going to do is give me a line so that I am perfectly ready, and I can tell just exactly where to line up my next piece.
Okay. And now you line up another rectangle.
That's right. So I can lay that right there. If I want to, I can pin. Once you get going, you don't even need to pin. And now I'm going to come to the machine and stitch on line number 2.
And I think our viewers can see where you folded 1/4 of an inch beyond the stitching line, so you knew where to cut.
Right, and that it makes it almost foolproof. And you can notice here,
As you finger press, right?
we already have our first spike in place. Once again, I will repeat that same process for every one of these seams through the arc. I'm on line number 3. I lay down my ruler, set it up at 1/4 of an inch, fold back my paper, and then trim off the excess fabric. Now it's time for another spike fabric, and I know exactly where to line that up.
And as Elaine is lining up that fabric, I'm just going to show you the finished arc, how she has created 4 spikes using the same process. You can see that each spike has very accurate points. Stitching has been accomplished on the paper side along each numbered line. After stitching around the edges, you might guess the next step is to do trimming and then attaching the 2 arcs. And that's what we'll show you how to do right at the table. This curve block, the New York Beauty, has 3 basic elements to it: the piece section and then the 2 arcs. And Elaine, you just finished piecing, adding with paper piecing the elements to the paper. But obviously, this isn't going to form an arc in this shape.
Right, and these dotted lines are now what we're going to use. We're going to cut around, as you can see in this finished one. And our arc is now sized to 6.5 inches, which will fit perfectly into our finished 6-inch block.
Now, the beauty of paper piecing is that you will have exactly the right seam allowance around the point of this design. If you sew on the line, you'll have it. So that's a great part. Now as we look at this smaller, or this blue and yellow block, you'll see the other two components that we pointed out earlier. And those shapes are going to be fused with web, paperback fusible web, and you have some specific shapes for us.
Right, I call this arc the inner arc. This arc is the outer arc. And so in the book that accompanies this program, both of these shapes are provided. And since we really only need the fusible web to be on this edge of this arc and on the edge of this arc, there's no need to draw out the whole arc. So here I have traced the inner arcs, and in order to help with our placement, there's dotted lines and solid lines. You want, when you're cutting them out, I suggest you cut right on those solid lines and then trace that solid center line. You can do several of them in a row, as I've done here.
So we'll allow about 1/4 of an inch on each side, so we cut along the dotted lines, approximately. It doesn't have to be exactly.
Right, and Nancy, here I have one cut out. You can see that I've cut exactly on those end lines, and I've got my 1/4 of an inch, just like you've mentioned.
So instead of cutting a curve or a partial curve, we're going to press on that shape. And rather than cutting that, we'll just cut squares. And the two arcs are cut from one square.
Right, a 7-inch square is the perfect size. And just like I mentioned, these edges will line up perfectly along the edges of that 7-inch block.
And then the larger arc, if you like making smaller arcs, you'll love making larger arcs.
Right, and it's exactly the same process where you've got your edges that serve to line things up, and the line that you're going to cut on is the solid line. And I guess I should rotate this properly. Here I've traced out 4 of them, which will make the outer arcs for 4 separate blocks.
And we'll trim the fusible web 1/4 of an inch or so from that solid line.
Right, and here's one ready to go, and it can be laid out, actually, it can be laid out right on this same 7-inch square that we cut, and both of our arcs, since it's the same fabric. Now, if you want this bottom arc that we see here to be out of a different fabric, which you certainly can do, then we'd use a 4-inch square down here, and we'll have plenty of room.
But for this particular block, we're just going to use this basic technique. Okay, and we'll just press. And then trim.
Right, now that we've got them pressed on, we're going to come along with the scissors and cut right on those lines.
So here I have a block, and then here's the inner block. So we have 2, not block, but arcs cut from this shape. So save this for another project, because there will be another project that you can use this.
Right, and what's nice to notice about this method is that we only have fusible web on this rim. So we don't have a lot of stiffness in our quilt when we have our finished project. So it's a real nice way to get the stabilization that fusible web provides for the stitching.
Great idea. Now you'll find a printed template to place your pieces, and I have the template printed and then an applique pressing sheet in place, and so we'll position the inner pieced block. I'll just kind of anchor it, and then remove the paper backing. And why don't you remove the paper backing from the larger one, Elaine, and I will position this one. So what you see is what you're going to get. You're going to match all the lines up, okay? And here is where you can do a little cheating, because if by chance your points were not right where they should be, you can make them work, because there's room for fudge.
Right, and in that same vein, we have figured in an extra 1/2 inch on the outside of this block, so that we're going to trim it down later, so that's where we have room for our...
And then after lining it up, we'll remove the pin, you press. So this is basting it together. In the first program, we did some stitching around the edges to hold it together. And here, Elaine is stitching, zigzagging with a narrow stitch, and you're using invisible thread.
I like to use invisible thread on this block because invisibility is really the look we're after.
So after doing the stitching, this one has the zigzag stitching already complete. You can see that it's not a square block. So go ahead and do some quick trimming.
Okay. What I've done is I've set up my ruler using some marking tape because I'm going to trim this block down to an exact 6.5 inches. And what I like to do is lay so that my diagonal line on the block goes right down the center of the block. And I can line it up with the center of that spike. I'm going to trim on this edge and trim on this edge, and then I flip the block one time.
And it's amazing. It is lining up just perfectly.
I love it when that happens.
Yes.
Okay, and there's your trimmed and finished. I have a little piece here that didn't quite
Well,
come
that
off.
happens. There you go.
And there is our perfect 6.5 inch New York Beauty block.
With fusing, pressing, and stitching. Once you know how to piece, stitch, and finally cut the block to the correct size, you're ready for some interesting layout combinations. But Elaine, we have to discuss one more step.
That's right. It's easy to forget this, but don't forget to take your paper out. Because we used a really small stitch length, the paper just perforates and just comes right off. And this is just regular typing paper that you've printed your arc shape on.
The quilt that you've been admiring behind us is Elaine's great design called Fans of Lady Liberty. You can see the Statue of Liberty silhouette coming through, and you placed these blocks on point.
Right, I basically saw an antique fan quilt, which was the inspiration for putting these blocks, which are not fans, but kind of looking at them as fans. The beauty of that is that the points of the curves do not have to match. There's nothing to match, just the intersections of the blocks.
And the great contrast in fabric is really dynamic.
Right, for this block to really shine, a high contrast between the spikes and the arcs gives the most pleasing effect.
Very dramatic. Then you can take another look at this quilt block in an arrangement. This called United We Stand.
Using Civil War fabrics, we get a completely different feel with this quilt. This time, we arranged the blocks in a circle, and we used a different fabric for the outer arc and the inner arc. And interestingly, I had to fussy cut these centers so that the stripe radiated out.
You pay attention to detail. Very nice. Now we can peel this back and show our viewers that we have the Lady Liberty layout in this arrangement of 4 blocks. But then just to do the changing to create a different look, we'll just do some rotation and spacing. Now it's not the same fabric we had before, but this is an interesting time to audition fabrics. Nice.
This is a scrappier look than we have on United We Stand, but you can see it works just as pleasingly just by playing with the block placement.
Yes, and so you do the simple stitching, piece the strips to the sides, traditional quilt making techniques so that you can get this block from 4 pieced Lady Liberties, or I should say New York Beauties, excuse me, and you get a nice big block. Elaine, you have one more beautiful quilt, and here's the large picture of it.
Yes, this is called Crowned Jewels, and in this quilt block, I was not looking for as much contrast, and you'll notice that the spikes, there's not as much value difference between the spikes and the background of the spikes.
You have red and purple, so they're on the color wheel, they're right next to each other.
Right, and it gives a completely different look. You're basically seeing a little, and then the white in the sashing really sets off a different kind of a look for the block.
So throughout this 2-part series on Applique Curves, we've been using paperback fusible web, which is the key element to working with this fusing. And then the shaping, cutting the shapes, pressing the shapes so that the shapes are stitched just the way you created them. Great job, Elaine. Thank you for being my guest.
Thanks, Nancy. It's been my pleasure.
In the sewing and quilting segments of today's program, we took an approach of working with an old-time quilt pattern and giving it a new look. Now in Nancy's Corner, we're going to go even further into the contemporary field and meet with Pat Croth. Pat is a well-known quilt artist, part of Quilt National, has exhibited many places around the country, and has great ideas on very contemporary looks. And you're working with fibers and fragments of fibers.
Yes.
And Pat, let's look at your first piece, because this was a springboard about 10 years ago for your very unique style, a style that I think many of us admire.
I started using fiber fragments. I was originally a crazy quilter, and I got to the point where I was saving smaller and smaller bits of things, and then I started using them in my contemporary work.
Now, this is a shield design where you kind of made a puzzle or mosaic.
My husband was an abstract geometrist, and we had long conversations about the symbols of math and logic and science, and I started using those symbols in my work.
And not only symbols did you include in your work, but as we look in the lower corners, you can see some buttons, some chains, we have even some screws and nuts and bolts, all held together by bridal illusion and crazy stitching.
Right, and I've created a base layer of fabric and then added the tulle on top, and then I've done the stitching on top of that.
Your sewing room and studio must be fascinating, filled with things.
There's lots of collections of things. It's a little frightening sometimes.
These pieces hang on walls. Of course, they're works of art, and this one is entitled?
This is Confetti Craze, and I was really just spinning off kind of a Mardi Gras motif. I liked the bright colors of it, and there's lots and lots of buttons, paper clips, and found objects in here.
I always remember the first time I saw your work, and I saw a Band-Aid in it. I've never left me.
Yes, it probably was there.
So anything can be included, but you have a great sense of style and what interesting fabrics go along with the findings.
This particular piece actually has some little toys in it as well.
Oh, sweet.
Kind of to carry out that party and
Yes.
Mardi Gras theme.
But you don't need elements or fragments you don't include in every one of your quilts.
Exactly. This piece is called Undercurrents, and it's really just a study of color and textures using a lot of different threads and yarns and
Lovely.
fibers in the surface, and it sprang from learning to swim. I was practicing swimming to swim in the Ironman here in Wisconsin, and I had not been a strong swimmer, and so this piece was a reflection of that whole experience.
Now the base fabric is laid down. You place all your mosaic pieces on top.
Right. So I start basically maybe in one corner, and I just start working and working with small bits of fabric. I create that whole surface layer, and then I do heat bond that to the surface. So I'm fusing it to the surface, and then I layer it again with more and more fibers.
And as I flip to the underside, you use black tulle, bridal illusion or tulle, and wrapped it to the underside, and then that edge is enclosed in the tulle. So it's a nice finish.
Right. I started using that technique. Some of my early pieces, I just had tulle over the surface. But my work travels internationally,
Yes.
and I was concerned about the preservation of that edge. And I do like that raw, irregular edge. So I started wrapping the surface and then stitching it as well.
Now, not only do you use fabric and interesting findings, but you talk about saving everything. This is the quilt that does that, or the wall hanging that does that.
Yes, there are things. Well, I have no shame. I will use just about everything. This piece is called Sweet Tooth, and it is based on just using all the candy wrappers that I found around my house. So there's just a plethora of
there certainly
things
are,
on the
right.
surface.
I can see all my favorites underneath here, so I think I like some of the same things your kids do. Candy wrappers, a great thing for sewing. I've never included that.
Well, the
You're
frightening
first,
part
Pat.
of it is that, you know, these were found laying around my house, so I don't know what that means in itself. But
So we started with your first piece. You obviously have many pieces other than what we're showing you, but now your latest work is with shears, sheer upon sheer. And this we're going to hold up for you so that you can see that you could hang it as a room divider, a panel, and what a beautiful piece.
it's a three-dimensional piece in that it's meant to be viewed from both sides. You can walk around this piece.
Yes.
and look through it. When it's hung
excuse
near a
me.
space, it will actually cast shadows on the wall in different colors, so it almost has the look of a stained glass.
Oh, how striking. All sewn together with variegated threads and free motion stitching.
Yes.
Charming. Pat, this is great work. It's so inspiring to see what you can put together, whether it's fibers, fabrics, bindings, elements, fragments. You're a master at this.
Well, thank you so much.
I appreciate you sharing this with our viewers, and thank you for joining us on Sewing with Nancy. I hope you've enjoyed this two-part series on applique curves. Bye for now.
Elaine Waldschmidt has written a fully illustrated book entitled Applique Curves, which serves as the reference for this two-part series. It's $17.49 plus shipping and handling. To order the book, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2305. Order item number Z1659, Applique Curves. Credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at sewingwithnancy.com for more information on this program. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Cabinets, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Classe Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Rowenta.